All right, this is probably one of the most vital steps that we teach people how to do because it makes the rest of the process easier. We recommend you separate all the part A and all the part B's out before you actually mix any of them together. So if you ordered just a base coat with one highlight, you want to separate the base coat part A and the highlight part A into their own containers, and the base coat part B and the highlight part B in separate containers. So you would have 4 separate containers. And that's what's nice about having lots of different containers that you bought from Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever you're buying your materials from. But I'm just separating out the base coat into its own container right now. And what makes it really easy is if you only have one highlight. Some people have done 3 or 4 different highlights. If you just have one highlight color, all you need to do is pour out your part A for your highlight in a container and pour out your part B in its own container for your highlight. And then everything you have left is for your base coat. That's the easiest way to do it if you have 1, even 2 highlights. Make sure that when you mix epoxy, all your measurements are pretty exact. You want to have 2-to-1 ratio. So 2 parts A to 1 part B. The B is the hardener. So if you don't have enough part B in there, the epoxy either won't get hard or will take a long time to get hard. In this video, we're separating our base coat into its own container, the part A of the base coat. So there's a lot. I think there's 106 ounces if I remember right. But again, it's a lot easier just to pour out the highlight amounts, and then whatever you have left, that's your A and B for the base coat. In this part of the process, we're not mixing any A and B together. They're remaining completely separate. One of the reasons why we're doing that is because in just a minute, we're going to add the metallic in the part A. We want to get the metallic mixed into the epoxy part A before we add the hardener. So I'm pouring out my 2 highlight colors. On this counter, we only decided to use 1 highlight after looking at it. You may do the same. You may like the colors and not want to add one of them. The 2 measuring cups that come in the countertop kit, I recommend you dedicate those to measuring out the epoxy and pouring the epoxy into different containers. So use one of those measuring cups to measure the part A and use the other measuring cup and dedicate it to part B. Never switching the measuring cups. Always only pour A into the A measuring cup and pour the B into the B measuring cup. You might even want to label those two cups just so you don't get mixed up. Again, because we don't want the two epoxies to touch until we're ready to use it. I know it seems like I'm doing a lot here, but if you just use the written instructions and follow the amounts, it's very easy. And I'll explain it one more time. When you open up the containers, pour out your highlight amounts, your part A into one and your part B into another container for your highlights. And then the rest of the part A and B that you have left is for your base coat. It will be the perfect amount to mix together. We ended up separating our highlight for the two coats. Not two coats, but two different colors. So that's the part B for my two highlight colors, part A. Let me say that again. So that's the part A for my two highlight colors in the small measuring cups. And then in the big bucket over to the right, that's the part A for my base coat. Now I did lots of different things there, but remember, all I was doing was separating all the part A's to my highlights and my base coat and getting them in different containers. And I'm going to do the same thing for the part B's for my highlights and base coat. That's all I'm doing. And again, the reason why I'm doing this is so that when it comes time to mix, you don't have to measure anything out. All of that annoying stuff is already done. All you have to do is pick up the part B and pour it into the part A. I'm separating out the part B for that big bucket of part A for my base coat. I'm not pouring it into the bucket, obviously. Always keep them separate. I can't stress that enough until you're ready to use them. Even my stir sticks I've dedicated to touching the A's and B's. I have different stir sticks for each one. I'm thinking about how much to set out, and it's important to think real hard about what you're doing because you don't get a whole lot of chances with this stuff. Once you pour the part B into A, it's go time. It's a lot easier to just pour out your highlights instead of doing what I'm doing, which is measuring out all of the base coat, part A and B. All right, this is the last little bit of the part B for my base coat. Now that I'm done with that, I can measure out the two highlight colors into their own containers. So if you have a base coat and two highlight colors, you're gonna have 6 containers, 3 with part A and 3 with part B. And of course, if you have only one highlight, you're only gonna have 4 containers. Notice I got my 2 part A's sitting there for my highlight. I'm just figuring out how much I need to separate for my part B's. So it's gonna be exactly half of whatever's in those containers. Need to make sure these are even. I look a little confused. You can try to do it without being so confused. Either that or I got something in my eye. There we go. No, what I actually did there was I poured some of the part A back into the other highlight color because I want more of one highlight than the other. You can use any method you want for separating the colors. You can have as much of one of the highlights as the other highlights if you've ordered multiple highlights. You just have to remember that the ratio of the part A to part B has to be 2 to 1. So if you have 10 ounces of part A, you only need 5 ounces of part B to add to that as hardener. And in the written instructions, of course, I did give you the exact amount in ounces. Now you're going to see me set all the part A's and all the part B's together so that I don't get confused. And I'm going to set the colors right next to those. So that container on the right is getting that metallic, and the container on the left is getting the metallic that's in the packet on the left. And then I have some more metallic that I'm going to separate out and put next to that. So I have one base on the right and 2 highlights.